day, everyone. Today we are going to discuss lesson number 12. It is the cellular respiration. Our objectives for today's lesson. First, explain the features and sequence the chemical events of cellular respiration. Next, describe the role of oxygen in cellular respiration and describe pathways of electron flow in the absence of oxygen. And last, distinguish major features of glycolysis, Krebs cycle, electron transport system, and chemiosmosis. These all need to be able to harvest energy from glucose to get the usable energy, ATP. Whether oxygen is present or not, cells can always do glycolysis, which occurs in the fluid or cytosol of the cell. No oxygen is needed for this. During glycolysis, the 6-carbon glucose molecule is broken in half and rearranged to make 2 pyruvic acid molecules. The process requires 2 ATP to get started, but ultimately it produces 4 ATP from ADP and phosphate, and it produces 2 NADH from NAD+. So overall, glycolysis makes 2 pyruvic acid, 2 ATP, and 2 NADH. From here, there are 2 possible pathways that could be taken. Cellular respiration always starts the same way with glycolysis. From there, the 2 pathways are determined by presence of oxygen. If there is no oxygen available, anaerobic respiration will occur. But if oxygen is available, aerobic respiration will occur in the mitochondria. Let's look at anaerobic respiration first. The anaerobic pathway has another name: fermentation. Fermentation is an anaerobic process that converts sugar to acids, gases, and/or alcohol. It includes the glycolysis steps in it. Fermentation replenishes the supply of NAD+, so that glycolysis can continue creating 2 ADP from each glucose molecule. There are 2 types of fermentation. There is alcohol fermentation and lactic acid fermentation. In lactic acid fermentation, pyruvic acid is converted to a chemical called lactic acid. The process changes NADH back to NAD+, so that glycolysis can continue and produce the 2 net ATP. Fermentation itself doesn't create any ATP, it's just keeping the glycolysis running. Our muscles use lactic acid fermentation. When there's not enough oxygen to do aerobic respiration, your muscle will feel cramped and painful. But this pain will go away as soon as you get enough oxygen back to your muscles so that you can go back into aerobic respiration. Other organisms use a different pathway and create an alcohol and carbon dioxide instead of lactic acid from pyruvic acid. Again, they still make NAD+ for glycolysis to use, but the pathway is a little different. Yeast will undergo alcoholic fermentation, and we use it to our advantage when making bread or beer. The alcohol and bubbles in beer are made up by yeast through alcoholic fermentation. When bread dough is left to rise, the rising comes from the production of carbon dioxide bubbles and fermentation. The alcohol in the bread cooks off in the baking process. Now, aerobic respiration is not actually very good in making ATP. It relies on just the 2 ATP can be made from glycolysis, but if oxygen is present, aerobic respiration will occur and it's an ATP producing machine. Aerobic respiration takes place in the mitochondria of eukaryotic cells and in the cytosol of prokaryotic cells. After glycolysis occurs in the cytosol and pyruvic acid is attached to coenzyme A, there are two major parts. The Krebs cycle, also known as the citric acid cycle. In the electron transport chain, which is paired with chemiosmosis, this last step is where oxygen is used. During the Krebs cycle, 2 ATP and gas carbon dioxide are produced. The carbon dioxide will eventually diffuse out of the cell. This is why we breathe out carbon dioxide. The electron transport chain and chemiosmosis take place in the folded inner membrane of the mitochondria called the cristae. In the end, aerobic respiration can make up to 38 total ATP theoretically, but usually it's a bit less than that, more like 30 to 32 ATP. So, final reaction is glucose plus oxygen yields 6 carbon dioxide and 6 water plus energy in the form of ATP and lots of it. That's all for our lesson today. I hope you learned something. Thank you for watching.